Welcome to a very special live breaking news episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, June 25th. I'm your host, Tom Moore. The Akron game in 67 days, the game against Michigan in 158 days. I'm joined by Tony Gerderman of BuckeyeHuddle.com, and we got another commitment to talk about. Third time in just a few days. Ohio State has landed a commitment. This time it is from four-star defensive end Zion Grady out of Alabama. And Tony, this is seemingly the continuation of a kind of surprising trend. The Buckeyes had not pulled a player out of Alabama in decades, 40 plus years. And now this is the second Alabama player they have a commitment from in the 2025 cycle.
It's really interesting because this is a state that anytime Ohio State was recruiting there, or, hey, there's a guy that's interested or he's going to take an unofficial, it's like, yeah, you're not getting anybody out of Alabama. And then when Naeem Offord committed kind of out of the blue of sorts, it was like, that's newsworthy, but come on. Are they going to be able to keep him? He's out of Alabama. And then to add a second player from Alabama into this class and Zion Grady, it kind of confirms what we've talked about with the perfect storm situation of what's going on at Alabama. Nick Saban leaves, and now everybody is free. Everybody outside of Auburn basically is free to come in and try to raid the state. And there are a ton of talented players in the state of Alabama. They're one of the fastest rising states in terms of prospects. I think like they're the number 14 prospect in the state is like the number 180 player in the nation, just to give you an idea of how deep that state goes.
Yeah, that is an area where Ohio State has not been able to pull a ton of talent over the years. They've been able to pull guys out of places like Georgia, where you get a lot of transplants. No one is actually from Atlanta. You get a lot of northern transplants there. You get a lot of guys out of Texas, a lot of Houston, those areas. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. It has been a very tough area for Ohio State to pull talent over the years. It seems like maybe they have cracked the code. Need to give probably a little bit of a shout out to Alan Clark, who's a assistant defensive line coach for the Buckeyes with a ton of ties down there. I think he's probably played a role in some of that success, but Tim Walton as well. Some good contacts down there. But let's not get hung up on that right now. Let's take a little bit more of a deep dive on Zion Grady. We've talked all about the state of Alabama and the history of recruiting there. We're going to talk a little bit about Zion Grady. Tony, what are the Buckeyes getting in Zion Grady?
Well, it's interesting because he's listed in like 6'4", 225, 235, somewhere in there. So he's a guy that can play defensive end or be a 3-4 outside linebacker. And then you go and watch his huddle highlights from last season, and he's playing a lot of 3-4 defensive end, which is not what he'll be in college because he's not nearly big enough. But that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for an edge rusher in that 4-3, somebody that can come off, and do be in parts of different packages as well. So true, I think, outside rusher, and they need him. They're down. They're going to be down, losing Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau after this year. They need to replenish. They've not been doing a very good job of that. And if they can keep him and keep Zahir Mathis and add maybe a Justin Hill and replenish things, but Zion Grady, a pretty tenacious pass rusher, and is accustomed to rushing inside as well, which makes me think that even though he is a 4-3, he's a guy that can also be used inside, perhaps in the rushman package, or we're going to talk about the jack roll at some point. Another guy that just sticks his nose in there and tries to create some havoc on the inside, and he's got experience with that.
And this is a very big cycle, 2025 is, for the defensive end position and those sort of edge rusher types for Larry Johnson and the Buckeyes. They only got one last year, Edric Houston. He's a very, very good one. He was a 5-star, but you only got one there. As you mentioned, you're losing Jack Sawyer, you're losing JT Tuimoloau after this year, and then you got Caden Curry, you get Kenyatta Jackson, who have played some, and then everyone else at that position is basically an unknown at this point. So this is definitely a very, very important class to reload that edge position. You got Zion Grady now. You have Zahir Mathis, ... but he just visited Penn State over the weekend. We'll see where that one goes. And then you've got Justin Hill announcing his commitment on July 3rd. That one seems like it's trending towards Ohio State. But none of these, Justin Hill is not in the class yet. You haven't signed Zion Grady yet, and I'm sure you're going to have more pressure on him from those Southern schools to stay home over the course of the fall. You had Zahir Mathis visiting Penn State. You feel like, boy, Ohio State could have 3 guys committed as, sort of to those edge roles / jack roles in a matter of a week. But, you don't have Hill yet, and the other 2 guys, you don't know exactly how solid those are, or how they're not signed yet, I guess. So, how do you feel? How solid do you think Larry Johnson is feeling about those edge spots right now?
Well, I think you got to feel pretty good that not only are you getting the time of day, but you're getting commitments. And it's the commitment that has been the difficult part in landing some of these defensive ends over the last 3 years, all the way down to signing day. But you were able to do it with Edric Houston, and you've been able to get some commitments here. Keeping them, of course, is another thing. But just the fact that you're landing the commitments at this point means that players are willing to they're not just dismissing you, basically, because, well, Larry Johnson's not going to be there. They're buying into he'll be there for as long as he's there, and it's about Ohio State and being developed there, and so the fact that they're not just dismissing things, I think, is a positive. But if you look at the composite rankings right now, Zahir Mathis is the number 5 edge rusher, Zion Grady the number 6, Justin Hill the number 7. I have to go back and look when was the last time they landed 3 top edge rushers in a class, and it's not necessarily like running back or quarterback where if you start adding more than one, people start to get a little concerned, because they all know that there's going to be rotating, and you can play 2 at any given time. So that's there's that, and they know they're not going to play a full game anyway. So I think it's a lot easier to convince players to be part of a group. And I see mention of London Merritt. I think he, who is also committed to Ohio State, I think he's already listed like 6'3", 250, 260. He might end up being a 3 tech, I think. So that's why I'm not really including him in that group. But if they can get those 3 guys, that helps them make up for some of the losses over the past few years.
Well, and the interesting piece of Zion Grady's commitment is the impact he may have on a couple other guys out of the state of Alabama, where there have been some question marks about will they be able to get guys to come north from Alabama and stick with commitments coming north from Alabama. Naeem Offord, the 5-star corner, he is currently committed to Ohio State, and I think that as long as he's committed, that's good news for the Buckeyes. That's another one where those Southern schools are probably going to make a real serious run at trying to keep him closer to home over the course of the fall. But I talked to Mark on a morning show towards the end of last week about that, and he said, boy, if they can get Zion Grady, that probably increases their chance of getting Malik Autry. And if they can get Malik Autry and Zion Grady, that really increases their chances of getting Naeem Offord. So, this feels like, package deals are always one of those things that recruiting guys kind of roll their eyes on. But this feels like one where maybe there's a little bit more to it than there typically is.
Well, and I think it's probably different than a package deal in that it's just a comfort factor. They're not all going to the same place, but if there are other players from Alabama there, they're going to be more inclined and see more comfort there. And I think it's telling that you had this commitment coming off of an official visit, and Naeem Offord was at Ohio State this weekend, and things seem to be stronger there, at least in terms of nothing we're hearing is bad right now. And then to land another player from Alabama right out of there, I think this is all moving in a positive direction. But then in terms of Malik Autry, Marcus said it, Kevin has said it, if you can get Zion Grady, it's a pretty good chance. So you have a better chance of landing Malik Autry, who is 6'5", 6'6", 320-pound, big defensive tackle. He's the guy that was the number 14 player in state, the number 180 player nationally, as we're talking about the depth in the state. And so I'm not breaking any rules here, but if you can recruit defensive linemen from the South, you should probably try and do that. And they've always tried to do it. Maybe they're getting better at it right now, or as we keep saying, with Nick Saban, when the cat is away, the mice will play.
Yeah, that's something that I think Ohio State has done really well over the years. You can't just continually raid one of those southern states for decades and decades on end. But when Georgia is down under Mark Richt, they go down there and they get Von Bell, they get Raekwon McMillan. When Texas is down sort of towards the end of the Mac Brown era, they go down there and they get Jeff Okudah and J.K. Dobbins and guys like that. And you can still pull individual guys out of there, but they've really made the most out of spots where the mouse is away. And when USC and UCLA were both down, you go out there and you get CJ Stroud, guys like that. They have done a very good job of taking advantage of those kinds of situations. And it does feel like, boy, it's getting harder to go into Georgia right now with Kirby Smart really got the Bulldogs rolling. But now Alabama's opened up a little bit because you've got Hugh Freeze not yet established at Auburn, and you've got Nick Saban now gone, and you got a whole staff turnover there. So yeah, you have an opportunity to maybe go in there and make some hay while the sun shines in some of those states. We're going to move on to a couple different guys and maybe some other guys who are visiting over the weekend who we have some updates on. But I do want to remind you, if you are watching live, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. That will help other folks find these shows. It just takes a second. Go ahead, do it right now. I'll give you 3 seconds. Ready? 3, 2, 1, push. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so let's talk a little bit about we got two commitments in already before Zion Grady over the weekend. First one from Bodman Miller, three-star wide receiver in-state, and then 3-star offensive lineman Jake Cook. These are two, Tony, where these are guys who spent a lot of time working for their offers, came back to camp, spent a lot of time putting in the hours. Jake Cook was a multi-year process. We saw him at camp years ago and really kind of remade his body and, eventually got to the point where they were comfortable and said, put out the offer, and both guys committed over the weekend. That feels like two really, really solid commits where this is going to be a very deep class. And, taking a couple guys like that who are going to be, you would assume putting in a lot of work, big fans of the in-home, the in-state school, that feels like those are guys that, you don't need them to be immediate impact players, but you have the opportunity for them to be impact players down the line.
Yeah, and they kind of fall into the range that Urban Meyer used to talk about with the late blooming Ohio players, that one of the reasons he was always against early signing days was because he wanted to be able to watch Ohio seniors have a senior season before and not lose those guys to other schools through an early signing day. We always go back to the Chris Borland, Wisconsin linebacker example, and Urban Meyer being very unhappy that guy got out of state when Wisconsin was like his only major offer. And it's like, he was below everybody's radar. So don't worry just about Ohio State missing on him, but you get some guys that are coming into their own under the radar, but fighting to be noticed. And I think that's the big thing. Generally, Tom, when you're trying to stay under the radar, you stay close to the water, and these guys are not trying to stay under the radar. They're trying to be noticed, and they were. And so we see the over the years. I think an interesting study would be the hit rate on camp offers, in terms of, especially this late, because these guys are going into their senior seasons, which is relatively rare because they should have already had their offers or be known by now. But they got, Justin Fry, Brian Hartline got firsthand looks at both guys and made them work for it basically, and repeatedly work for it. And they saw enough, and both guys, neither guy wasted much time. They both wanted to be Buckeyes. And as you said, the patience that they'll show, they're not being asked, hey, we need you next year, 2025, we need you in the 2 deep. Neither of these guys is being asked that. If that happens, that's great. But I think we know offensive line is a developmental position. And when you bring in a quarterback like Bodman Miller to play receiver, there's going to be some time that takes as well. So there's some understanding for both of those guys.
Yeah, and you have the luxury between the number of offensive linemen they've been bringing in, and they've kind of rebuilt the depth there, and then the caliber of wide receivers they've brought in over the last few years. You're not desperate for a starter for either of those guys, in the next year or two. So you do have the luxury of giving them some time, letting them develop, letting them kind of, get up to speed, get up to strength, get up to technique, all of the stuff you need to do to adapt from the high school level to the college level. So those two guys. Other commitments, keep an eye out. It could be another commitment coming. Could be more than one commitment coming later this week, and then a couple announcements set for next week as well. So very busy time on the recruiting front. A couple other guys who were visiting over the weekend. We've got three names we're going to talk about: David Sanders, Dorian Brew, Jordan Davison. And it feels like, Tony, of the three of those, I think if you gave the Ohio State coaching staff, hey, you can only get one of these. I think the question is, how fast would they say David Sanders? Because not only is he a top 5 player nationally, but also, an offensive tackle. You already got Carter Lowe in the class. If you could bring in a David Sanders, top 5-star offensive tackle, like, boy, that bookend tackles that are, top 50 players in the country, that is not something you can pull off very many classes. And it sounds like Mark Givler has a full update on David Sanders on the huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So we're going to keep this a little vague. If you want the details, sign up, become a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But, broadly speaking, it seems like that's going about as well as it could. And that's coming from Mark, who has not always been super optimistic about their chances landing Sanders.
Yeah, I think there are a number of things going for them. They're going to do everything they can, and they can. The NIL is there, the opportunities are there, the relationships are there. So they're nothing but positives for Ohio State. And then the visit was very, very good. And we saw Deontay Armstrong, true freshman, tweeting out from some of the photos of the visit and the work that the existing Buckeyes are putting into land David Sanders. And like you said, if you can get both him and Carter Lowe, you're doing pretty well. I might have to disagree with you in terms of, Tom, if you ask Tim Walton which guy he would rather have, Devin Sanchez or sorry, now Dorian Brew or David Sanders, which way do you think he's going?
Well, I'm sure Tim Walton is going to pick the guy who's in his room. So yes, I'm sure that every position coach would like to get the guy who he's recruiting. And Dorian Brew, no slouch either. He's the number 5 corner in the class right now. Bear in mind they have the number 1 and number 2 corners in the class. So Tim Walton has already. I mean, he's built up those recruiting bona fides pretty quickly to the point that we're talking about him in the same breath as Brian Hartline as a positional recruiter. It seems like, this is, I don't know if it's imminent, but it seems like the Dorian Brew thing is still very strongly a possibility for the Buckeyes. And if you can get Brew in the class, I think with some of the guys talking about at safety, and, we'll see where things go with Trey McNutt at this point, but you're talking about if they get Brew and they keep Offord and they keep Sanchez and they keep Fahim Delane, and they keep the other guys they've got committed in the secondary, it feels like you're talking about one of, if not the best secondary classes in the history of college football.
And a class that would kind of ease the pain on losing a 5-star safety from in-state in Trey McNutt if that happens, where how can you complain? Just watch. This is how you complain. You let an in-state guy go, and it's almost like, doesn't matter what else you've signed or gotten, you've lost somebody. So, but the numbers are there's a lot of them, and so there's quality, there's quantity, the different roles that you see these guys playing. 3 cornerbacks in a class is fine because of the different the nickel situation in there as well. And I think it's always safer. It's always safe to add an extra corner in a class because he can always move to safety at some point if need be. So there are different things that you can do and make it work, because the other thing is you're not going to hit on everybody. So if it's better to take a few more swings and if you miss one, maybe hit on the other 2.
Yeah. Let's get through a couple questions real quickly. Thomas Mesha wants to know, will Justin Hill be a linebacker or edge rusher? He's 6'3", 220 pounds. And the answer might be none of the above.
Yeah, they're talking to him about the jack role, the jack position, which is a hybrid linebacker edge rusher. Well, I don't think in this defense they're looking at him as a linebacker, and he has to get a little bit bigger to be a full-fledged defensive end. So that's why they're talking to him about this hybrid thing that I still think we're going to see this year, because they keep recruiting for it. So if you're going to recruit for it, you're going to have to show it. So and he may eventually grow into a 4-3 defensive end, and maybe develop into a 3-4 outside linebacker in the NFL, like we always see, where some of the, like a 250-pound defensive end or 260-pound defensive end goes and becomes a 3-4 outside linebacker in the NFL and all of those 3-4 defenses.
All right, next one from Jeff Frazier. Has the kid who decommitted from USC gone anywhere yet? That is Isaiah Gibson, defensive end. He decommitted from USC last week, middle of last week, while he was on a visit with Ohio State in the middle of the week. He is not committed anywhere yet, so that's another one to kind of keep an eye on. No decision there yet, but if Ohio State can add him, I'm sure they would be very happy to add him. Hollywood Hagar wants to know, do you think this is the reason Zahir Mathis visited Penn State? I don't get that sense that was a direct link there. As you said earlier, Tony, it feels like you can take multiple defensive ends here, and with as thin as the depth chart is looking next year, there's still a relatively clear path to the playing field.
Yeah, and again, this is a guy from Philadelphia taking it to Penn State. So it's an in-state school. We've seen so many of these guys talking about, I only get to do this once, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the trips, see the places, make sure I'm making the correct decision. And if it's a relatively short trip, then, why not? But of course the coaches are always concerned, and that's why there has to be communication. It's the ones where you don't tell the coaches that you're taking a visit to another school, where it's like, what, this is a little, then that's when they get concerned. When you tell them, yeah, I'm going to go visit, it's like, okay, but at least you told me. And now you just go and wait. I don't think it's ever a great thing, but we've seen it so many times where guys take all kinds of visits and still stay where they're originally committed to.
Yeah, it feels like that's almost the norm now. The guy who commits and really truly just shuts it down, that's almost the exception at that point. It feels like, this is Dabo Swinney used to have the no visit policy at Clemson. If you were committed and you visited, you weren't committed. I don't know if they're still doing that. And Dabo is about as old school as it gets with the transfer portal and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's even that rule has gotten bent a little bit over the last few years, where it's just the players have so much more leverage now with NIL and all the transfer portal and all that kind of stuff. You want to go, you want to see what your options are. You want to keep your options open, and you want to know, hey, if this doesn't work out, you want to have a plan B just in case. And we've seen schools and heard about plenty of schools that are recruiting guys who they know they have no chance of getting right now because, hey, if you're in the, maybe you're going to be in the portal in a year or two, and then we'll have a chance to get you then. Those are relationships that guys are continuing to build right now. Drowsy Dragon says Larry Johnson is a legend, makes all the difference with these defensive linemen. I think that is absolutely true. And we see guys, how many guys have we seen and heard over the years, Tony, come up to Ohio State camps just because they want to work with Larry Johnson, because Larry Johnson is the guy who worked with Chase Young and Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa and all those kind of guys. And they want to work with the guy who worked with those guys.
Yeah. And I wonder, just thinking about it now, how many guys that went elsewhere were told by the schools that they ended up going to, he's never going to be there for your full 3 or 4 or 5 years. How many players have seen them? They've already gone and graduated, and Larry Johnson is still at Ohio State. You probably put together a pretty good list of players who have been told that, believed it, and went somewhere else. And you wonder what they feel about that now.
Yeah, I know that was a thing when Nick Bosa was being recruited. I know that was a thing when Chase Young was being recruited, and Jonathan Cooper and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. And here those guys are heading into their 4th years, and still there's Larry Johnson. So, yeah. And again, I do want to shout out Lyle Clark, who is the assistant defensive line coach, who is that is a name that I think a lot of people don't know. I think that's a name that more people probably should know, because I think he plays a bigger role in some of this stuff than I think the average folks might realize, and especially strong ties to the South. And Nick Saban's absence is not the only reason they're having more success in the South now than they used to. So that's another reason there. Omar, our good buddy Omar, longtime friend of the program, Omar says, "Thanks for telling me to wait until I got back to the States. I bought Wi-Fi for nothing." Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Omar was on a cruise and had put a request in on our board that no news happened while he was on his cruise, so he didn't have to buy the Wi-Fi. And they just keep getting more commits and more commits and more commits. Very inconsiderate. Sorry you had to buy the Wi-Fi, Omar, but there has been a lot of content the last week or so, so I'm not complaining. Mika Hanna wants to know, does Jake Cook get the 4th star? He was at one of the rivals camps and was the offensive line MVP. Mm-hmm. So I would be surprised if he didn't. I have not looked to see if he's gotten the 4th star with them, but that's typically the kind of thing where if you're getting camp MVP and you're getting offers from bigger schools. He was committed to Louisville and then decommitted and then got the Ohio State offer and committed to the Buckeyes. Typically that offer, that 4th star is going to be contingent on camp performances. It's going to be contingent on which schools are offering you. And so, I don't know if he's going to get it or not, but it feels, Tony, like that's at least a much more solid possibility than you would have guessed 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, he is the number 9 interior offensive line prospect per Rivals, the number 201st player, a 4-star. Everybody else has him as a 3-star still right now. But there will still be updates and all through what all of these sites continue to do their updates. So I think once you get a school like Ohio State or the Bama bump, things like that, where people have to kind of take a new look and relook at things, but also there becomes more stuff to look at. And Cook was really working this summer and was making himself seen, and you see the results. So I don't know what it will take for him to become like a composite, or, the best thing to do is just go with the ranking that ranks your guy the highest and use that one as, he's like I said, top 10 interior prospect, Jake Cook. That sounds better than number 82 interior offensive line prospect, Jake Cook, doesn't it? I mean, what have you ever done a resume?
It does feel like, that typically is how a lot of people do discuss it online. And, I generally will look at the 247 composite because that's kind of the mixture of everyone, but you'll get wide variations. And, if a guy has been to a Rivals camp and has a much higher number from Rivals than he does from others, sometimes that's a reflection of the fact that he didn't go to an on-3 camp, or he didn't go to a 247 camp and they haven't seen him. So they don't, they haven't seen him in person. So they don't know, we'll see how that pans out. The stars matter, Tony. I don't want to anger a former colleague on the beat by not saying the stars don't matter, but it does matter. It does have a strong correlation with your NFL draft performance and all that kind of stuff, being a 3-star versus a 4-star versus a 5-star. But we have certainly seen plenty of 3-star linemen and 4-star linemen and 5-star linemen all turn out just fine. That is, as we said, a very developmental position. Here's a good one from the football extraordinaire. If you could take one player, the 5-star wide receiver that decommitted from USC, or the lineman, so I guess that's Isaiah Gibson. Who are you taking, Tony?
What 5-star wide receiver decommitted from USC?
I'm not sure.
5-star. I would take Zachariah Branch from USC.
Yeah. I'm not sure which 5-star wide receiver decommitted from USC. The lineman.
They had 2 defensive linemen back to back. Justice Terry, I think, is the other. Yeah, that was 2 days in a row where they lost those 2 guys, both from Georgia, which you almost should know better. But
to me, though, you look at position of need right now. Without let's just make it generic 5-star wide receiver. It doesn't matter who it is. Generic 5-star wide receiver versus Isaiah Gibson, edge rusher. I'm probably going edge rusher there because it's more of a position of need right now. Wide receiver, if they have a cycle without a 5-star, they're going to be fine. It is not a big deal. They've got a 5-star wide receiver, Chris Henry, on deck already for 2026. We just saw him last week, and holy smokes, that guy is. I'm not concerned about that ranking dropping. Put it that way. But you've got, defensive end is such a position of need this cycle. I think you look at, if you're choosing anyone, you probably pick David Sanders, the 5-star offensive tackle. But behind that, boy, a defensive end, any kind of defensive lineman is probably next on that list behind offensive line.
Yeah, and they've got a bunch of interior defensive linemen, but you don't know much about them in terms of, are they going to pan out? Are they going to be productive? They've got bodies. We'll find out this year just how good some of those guys are, or we'll have an idea of how good they're going to be. But I think you can never have enough disruptive defensive ends. And if you bring one more in and somebody's like, well, now I'm going to transfer out, that's just the nature of the business now. And I don't think you can. It's kind of like the Julian saying thing. You're going to tell him no, you're going to bring him in, and whatever happens after that happens after that. If there is a top defensive end and an edge rusher that wants in, you're going to make room for him, and you may not even have to make room for him. Somebody else will move and make room for him. It's just one of those positions you don't turn down.
And it's also just in terms of the pure numbers right now, it's just not as tight as it used to be because you have so much more fluidity with the roster, where the Buckeyes right now are entering the season under 85. That never happened for years and years and years. It was always, boy, they're at 88. How are they going to get down to 85? They're at 82, 83 right now, depending on how you're counting the numbers. And they're going to lose a ton of guys after this year, just from guys heading off to the NFL. A lot of seniors, a lot of guys exhausting their eligibility. So this is going to be a big recruiting class. And then just the reality of modern college football being what it is, you're going to have a lot of turnover every cycle. So you need to load up at a lot of these different positions. We've picked up a bunch of new people in the last 5-10 minutes. I'm going to let you all know, if you can hit the thumbs up button, that will help us out. Just a nice little thing you can do that helps other folks find these shows. Let's go to the one from Mika Hanna. Do we land Preston Bowman? Preston Bowman, the 3-star wide receiver out of Pickerington North High School. Very, very impressive camp performance at Ohio State earlier in June. Had a pretty good day up in Michigan. Had a pretty good day, I think, somewhere else. Our buddy Bill Bender from the Sporting News wrote all about him, a fellow Pickerington guy. He was someone, Tony, that really stood out to me at the Ohio State camp. And, I remember talking to you there and saying, boy, it's too bad if he's not going to get an offer. He's going to be the kind of guy that Ohio State fans go, why didn't we offer that guy when he's putting up 1,000-yard season for Purdue or Kentucky or wherever he was going to end up? Well, he committed to Kentucky, and then the next day he got an offer from Ohio State. So, the answer I know is we'll have to wait and see. But what do you think? Does Ohio State ultimately end up landing Preston Bowman?
It seems like if you're going to offer him, you expect a commitment. And so I would go with that. But I do know he got the offer, and he told I forget who that he's solid to Kentucky. Now that's an immediate aftermath. We'll see what happens as things go. But we don't necessarily talk about guys that we see at camp that aren't likely to get offers from Ohio State, but just impress us. And he was one of those guys, and he was going against some good defensive backs, and he was making all of the catches, finishing just really, really strong, really solid, and constantly making plays. And so that finally bore some fruit in terms of landing an Ohio State offer. We'll see if he's one of these guys that is bothered by the fact that it took so long, which happens at times where you're like, what more did you need to see? And even in the length of time that it took from the camp to the offer was a long time, because we see all the time guys get offered on the field after camp. They're like, okay, hey, we've seen enough. And so this one was, even more so. Yeah, you got your offer, but was it because of the Kentucky commitment, or was it because of the direction the other recruitments are going? But the other thing is, this is big business for all of these people. And so this is just part of the business. There's a board of guys that we like. We've got a top 10 list of receivers. You may be number 7. Once you move up into like the top 5 possibilities, then we're going to offer you. And so that's every position. And that's just a process. If you want to be a Buckeye, now is your opportunity. If you want to stick with Kentucky, you'll have that opportunity. But yeah, when when we saw him and it didn't look like an offer was coming, it was like, I think I said the name David Bell to you in terms of one of these guys that is just super productive wherever he's gone, and could have been offered by Ohio State or had an offer by Ohio State, but they just didn't go after him hard enough. And you're like, why is that guy not wearing scarlet and gray?
Yep. Yeah. And David Bell worked out just fine for Purdue, and you feel like Preston Bowman's going to work out just fine wherever he ends up, whether that's Ohio State or Kentucky or somewhere else. My bigger question with Preston Bowman is, where is the rest of the Big Ten on him? You should have offers from every Big Ten school that is not a perpetual college football playoff team. You should have had him 6 months ago. Where on earth are you, Purdue and Illinois and Indiana and all of those others, Michigan State? That feels like a big miss by the rest of the Big Ten to let him go to Kentucky and commit to Kentucky, and then sort of we'll see where that goes from there. Here's another one for Mika. Could we still land Jakeem Stewart? That is the 5-star elite 2026 defensive lineman. 2026 asterisk could be 2025. Mm-hmm. That's something that I've talked to Mark about on several morning shows, where he has not said he's going to reclassify to 2025, but he's basically put himself in a position academically to reclassify to 2025. He's one of those people who you look at camp, and it's like, even among kids who are 2 years older than him, or a year older than him, he looks the part. He is holding his own and then some, dominating some of the guys who are older than him. You wonder how much more he has to prove in high school. And sure, Ohio State could land Jakeem Stewart. You're trying to get him out of Louisiana, which is not going to be easy. It feels like they're in a decent position right now, but how much of this comes down to, is he a 2025? Is he a 2026? Because if they're in a decent position now and he reclassifies to 2025, you would think that would potentially help their chances of landing him.
Well, and I'm almost always against a guy reclassifying a year up. In this situation, though, this might be a better thing for Ohio State. Like, I don't think it's ever been good. It wasn't good for Quinn Ewers doing it for Ohio State. It wasn't good for Ohio State. I don't think it was good for Ohio State that Sonny Styles did it. This might be the exception, because there is a timing issue in terms of how many years will Larry Johnson be here. So if he wants to get in and guarantee Jakeem Stewart wants to guarantee that he has at least one more year with Larry Johnson, then he might. Then you come in 2025, and I think that's one guy that the sooner you can get in, the better, just to have him in here. And it's a different kind of time frame than with Quinn Ewers, which completely it just wasn't going to work with two guys in the same class and one guy showing up in August, and it wasn't going to work. And then Sonny Styles, just very, very talented, but still trying to find a position. And so the first 2 years of college was spent growing into a position when, if he hadn't gone and graduated early, he could be a sophomore right now and be a sophomore starting linebacker or whatever. So this is I think would be a good thing for Ohio State. But the thing is, then he is still young for a defensive lineman, which is a tough ask for major college football. But he's going to be a young lineman wherever he ends up going if he reclassifies. At this point, I think if you're doing it, if you've got the classwork being done, I would expect him to be in 2025, and so and at least in the class, not necessarily Ohio State's class, but if they can keep their other guys, then boy, now we're talking. But we've had this conversation in years past about, man, if they get this defensive end, they get this defensive end, they get this defensive end. And then, the one defensive end went to Notre Dame, the other defensive end went to Oregon, and the other one went to Alabama. And so you end up with one guy, in a class. So we don't need to talk about that just yet. But Tom, could you imagine?
Yeah, you would hope, and I'm sure Larry Johnson is very much hoping that doesn't happen again this year. Having a couple guys committed already certainly helps. Having Justin Hill potentially added to the class potentially when he commits on July 3rd, that would obviously help as well. So there's, they could be really stacking guys for the 2025 class. And then, if Jakeem Stewart does reclassify, I don't have a ton of concern about him physically because he already looks like a college player, even though he just wrapped up his second season of high school football. He looks about as physically ready as anyone you've seen. He might be in the Chase Young conversation just in terms of how physically developed Chase Young was when we first saw him in 2019 or 2017, right? In the spring of that year. I just remember looking at him and going, that's not a freshman. That looks like a college sophomore or junior. And, he was kind of an immediately physical ready guy. Here's one from Dwayne Galloway. And I looked at that name and thought, hey, that's funny. There's a player named Dwayne Galloway. And this question is also about Dwayne Galloway. I'm going to guess that's not a coincidence. Tony, do you think the Buckeyes will offer Dwayne Galloway Jr.? He was sort of in that same Preston Bowman conversation that we were having, where there was a camp. He camped once, one of the days earlier in June. And it was like you kept looking up. I was like, man, who is that corner making all these plays? And it was Dwayne Galloway, in-state prospect, does not have an offer from Ohio State. Just watching him, you kind of went, oh, yeah, that guy could play for Ohio State. And I think the question here is really, well, they have commitments from the number 1 and number 2 corners in the class. You've got Dorian Brew, the number 5 corner in the class. Is there any room at the inn at this point if you get those 3 guys? Because even taking a deep secondary class, if they get 6 guys in the secondary, 7 guys in the secondary, given some of the other guys they have, you might not have room. But he's another one, Tony, that I looked at him and went, oh yeah, that guy's going to be a good college player wherever he ends up.
It was physical and long and tall and making plays and just a pain for the receivers to try and get free of. And, I was asking him around about him as well. Like, who is that? Who is that? And then if you're told, you're like, okay, I know that name. But you also know it as like, well, it looks like on the outside looking in for an offer because of what they've got going on now. But like defensive ends, I don't think you can have enough really, really good corners, and corners with length are at a premium. But there are only so many spots, and maybe we'll see as things develop with the roster. And it's like, okay, well, we have one less receiver than we thought, so we can pull from another position, or we're deep enough here, we can pull somebody else. If they don't get 3 running backs in the class, is there a spot there? So just some maneuvering there. And then again, it becomes a situation where some players don't like to be slow played and they take it personally and they move on. And so there's so many different factors there, but a really impressive player, physical. There's a lot to like there for sure.
Yeah, Mika agrees. Love Dwayne Galloway. Hopes Ohio State offers. Yeah, we will see. And as Tony said, there are a lot of moving parts there. Do they hit on all of their top corner targets? Do they maybe have another spot available somewhere where they miss on someone at a different position group and you got a spot? Because, as I said, everything I saw looked like, yeah, that guy could play at Ohio State or play just about anywhere else he wanted to in the country. Going to be a good college player at the P5 level wherever he ends up. Here's one from Tony Muscati. Over under 2.5 top 100 commits in the next 10 days. That's a lot. Are we counting Grady in this? Are we counting Zion Grady in this, or is that one already old news? Because you got Justin. Go ahead.
So even if we did, I might go under. But because when is Dorian Brew announcing? When is Justin Hill announced? Justin Hill is what, the 3rd or the 4th of July?
Yeah, Justin Hill's the 3rd of July. I don't know that there's a date set for Dorian Brew yet. There's not. David Sanders is going to announce sometime before the season, but that could be July or August. I don't know that there's going to be more than 2.5 top 100 guys who announce anywhere who they're in on in the next 10 days. That's
right.
If there's not a date set, that's pretty hard to say. So I guess we can both be haters and go under, but we will remind you, Ohio State does have the top class in the nation right now for 2025. And, with some of the guys they're in on and as big as this class could be, this does feel, Tony, like this could be the year that they finally do end up with the number 1 overall class in the country. Although Georgia's class is looking pretty strong as well. Stop me if you've heard that before.
Yeah. I think anytime you're leading in June, you've run out too fast. You're like, this is where the trainer's like, no, you idiot, what are you doing? You're supposed to hang back. And because we've seen Notre Dame a year or two ago, and I remember dealing with Notre Dame fans talking about their number 1 ranked recruiting class in June. But right now, with the guys that they got, and if they can get David Sanders, like they're going to have a legitimate shot at it because they've got their quarterback, they've got some good running backs. It's just the race when you watch, and we won't necessarily see it from Alabama this year, but when you would watch the SEC schools come up from behind in November, December, and like Alabama would have, I don't know, like 5 commitments in October, total. And then November, December hits and they've gone from 14th class to the number 1 class. And it's just, that's how they close. And that's how the SEC closes. Ohio State has opened very, very well. If they win, if they win the number 1 class, it's going to be about how they close. And they're going to be competing with some really, really good closers.
Yeah, they are. Georgia currently at 13 commits and number 5 in the 247 composite right now. Ohio State number 1 with 19 commits, Alabama number 2 with 18 commits, Notre Dame number 3 with 21 commits, Auburn number 4 with 16, and then Georgia number 5 with 13. If you want to talk about the average star ranking, Ohio State's slightly higher than Georgia right now, but it is pretty close. Steve Thompson wants to know if this impacts Justin Hill's decision. I am not expecting this to impact Justin Hill's decision. Are you?
No, I don't. And as I said before, the dude is wearing a stocking cap, knit cap in 94-degree weather on a plastic field. And that said Ohio State. So, like, I know we can go back to the Rico McCoy thing from like 2004, wearing an Ohio State shirt at a camp or whatever. But you don't wear that hat unless you are a Buckeye, Tom. That's just my thought. I mean, you're not going to put yourself through that unless you are a Buckeye.
Definitely not. Although I did see Jeremiah Smith wearing a knit hat at camp and then put that on our board with, tell me you're from South Florida without telling me you're from South Florida, wearing a knit hat on a 95-degree day or whatever it was. And then Justin Hill from Cincinnati did the same thing. So maybe it is just maybe it's just a style thing. I don't know. Mike Schaefer says, is Ohio State giving up on DeCorian Moore, Jamie French, Vernell Brown at wide receiver? If so, is it for cap reasons? Read NIL priority. I don't think they're giving up on any of those guys, but I think this maybe to me goes back a little bit, Tony, to the conversation about what's your priority in this class. And if you had to choose a 5-star wide receiver or say 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders, I think the Ohio State coaching staff is going to say 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders is probably more important to their success in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. And it's about what do you need? What do you have? And that's why you see some schools offering a ton of money to a quarterback because they don't have one and they need one. And you could, if you get like Florida with Jaden Rashada, if you land him and he can jumpstart your program, it's worth it. Nico at Tennessee, you're trying to get somebody that can carry you through that the Joe Milton bridge and get you back to where you were with Hendon Hooker. The need at receiver for Ohio State for that premium isn't there. It is for other programs where the cost will be justifiable. And then, it's not necessarily just NIL. There is also the fact that the road to playing time might be better at other programs, other schools. The location, I mean, in-state prospects. If Ohio State loses to Texas on a Texan or loses to Miami on a Floridian, you can't just call that NIL. You can just that's happened before. It'll happen again. But I do wonder, like, if Ohio State really, really, really wanted DeCorian Moore and they had the full force of the Death Star behind them, could they get him? And would it would not be as money well spent, Tom, as we talk about this in the open, as opposed to getting David Sanders, which I think is going to be the bigger need, especially with Chris Henry on the horizon and more to come. And so are they giving up on him? I don't, if they want to come aboard, sure. I don't think they're going to tell any of those guys no right now. So I don't think they're giving up on them, but you've got to, you can't go into December without plans, and Ohio State is making plans.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a matter of priority. And as you said, if those guys want in, I'm sure Ohio State would be more than happy to take those commitments but you have to prioritize, resources and all of that kind of stuff. And that seems certainly like right now where some of the things are being prioritized. Lisa says, good thing is my birthday is getting closer, which means it's almost time for me to get ready for the season to start and for Big Ten Media Days. Plus, it's almost July, last month, until the season starts in August. Yeah, we are less than this time next month. We'll be wrapping up Big Ten Media Days. I think we're that is coming quick. Camp season already over. We're kind of into commitment season now, late June, early July, in the wake of the official visits being done. That's when you typically get a couple weeks very busy with commitments, and then Big Ten Media Days right around the corner, and then camp starts on August 1st this year. So yeah, the season is getting here it is a long off season, and we are just about there. And Eric Biddle, strong agree here. Hey guys, I'm so stoked for this coming season. I can't wait. Tony, strong agree. What do you say?
You know what? I'm kind of wishy-washy on how this season is going to go. You got these new playoffs. You got this exciting Ohio State football team that people want to see. It's not my cup of tea, Tom. I'm really more of a just old school. Give me a 2004 Ohio State offense any day, and like a 2017, 2018 Ohio State defense. Give me something really hard to watch in both sides of the ball. That way I can grumble and I don't have high expectations, but I can still really, really complain. That's really what makes me happy, Tom.
That's the recipe for an Outback Bowl and starting the new year in a stadium shaped like a pirate ship. I mean, could you think of a better way to start 2025? I can't off the top of my head. Tony, I wasn't going to bring this up, but Odysseus did. Odysseus 2002, more likely to make a wild card, Tom's Mets or Tony's Cubs. Tony, did you see what happened in the series at Wrigley Field over the weekend?
I saw it was on TV yesterday, but no, Tom, I know the Cubs fans I follow on Twitter have not been very happy. So I assume things have not been going well.
Things have not been going well. Mets took 2 of 3 in Wrigley. I'm just going to check the wild card standings right now. The Mets still, Mets only 1 game out right now. Cubs 2 games out. Mets, this is one where I don't know if I really want them to win the wild card because that feels like they're going to do something stupid and buy at the deadline, which they shouldn't. Like this is kind of let's not do anything dumb. Let's think long term. But yeah, I think coming off of that series, I will say Mets have a better shot. They've a pretty soft schedule for the next couple weeks, so we'll see how that goes. Either way, Tony and I will be in Wrigley Field later in the year. There will be action in Wrigley Field after September this year, one way or the other, because the Buckeyes are playing Northwestern there, so that'll be fun. But yeah, I'm just looking at all this, this conversation in the chat, the comments about the season and the Oregon game and all that stuff. Like, boy, this is going to be a really, really fun season. I'm pretty excited.
Well, and we're already texting it up last night in the group text about Portland restaurants, Eugene pizza places. So yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward to it. And of course the Portland hostel where we'll be staying, I think it'll be fantastic as long as nobody breaks into our tent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Eli Roth is the guy who runs it. I'm sure it's going to go great. I can't wait. Going to be great. As long as we survive the hotel, we'll have a fun season. We are looking forward to seeing all you guys at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is where, if you were looking for a way to support us, getting membership there is a great way to do it. Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team there. Mark, very, very busy covering recruiting. This has been a very busy month of recruiting. And then we've got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well, plus a really fun and active community on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. We hope to see you there. That is a great way to support us, and it's a great way to enjoy what should be a very memorable Ohio State recruiting season and football season and college football season in general, because, boy, there's a lot of new and exciting stuff going on this year and this fall. So thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you for all of the comments. Thank you for all of the fun. Thank you for all hitting the thumbs up button. If you have not hit the thumbs up button already, please do that. Please make sure you check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. Please make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when we go live, because this will probably not be the last commitment of the year for Ohio State. So we'll probably be back live doing more of these shows in the coming days and weeks. So that is all good stuff for you to do. Thank you guys all for joining us. We'll talk to you later.